All right, so you guys really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of what makes name redacted tick this time around.
Yeah.
Why he thinks he's the best for the job, and why some people are drawn to that, even with, well, all the baggage that comes along with it.
Right.
So buckle up, because we're diving deep into all of that.
It's a fascinating and complex picture, no doubt.
Oh, you said it.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we unpack everything, let's just make one thing crystal clear.
Yeah.
We are not here to take sides, just to understand.
Right.
Think of it like we're dissecting a persuasive speech.
Sure.
Even if the message itself isn't your cup of tea, there's a lot to learn from how it's crafted, right?
Absolutely. It's about uncovering the mechanics of persuasion.
Yes.
The emotional threads being pulled.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's start with his core message this time around. We've gone through mountains of speeches, interviews, and honestly, some of it was pretty surprising.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for one, that whole America First thing is back in a big way.
That's not surprising. It's a powerful phrase, even if the exact policies behind it are still a bit fuzzy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean in practice?
Right.
But I could see how it taps into this idea of strength, of putting America's interests front and center, which is probably reassuring for folks who feel like the country's headed in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. It plays on those anxieties.
Right.
And it goes hand in hand with another big theme, economic nostalgia.
Okay.
He constantly points back to the pre-pandemic economy as proof that he can deliver the goods.
Right.
And for someone who was thriving back then, it's like he did it once, he can do it again. Even if it's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, so much has changed since then.
Right. The world is a very different place now.
Yeah.
But he's appealing to that desire for a simpler time, a return to perceived prosperity. You know.
Interesting.
It's about tapping into a feeling, you yearning for something better. But here's the thing.
Okay.
It's not just about the economy.
Right.
He's also playing on some deep-seated anxieties about security and belonging.
You mean with the whole immigration issue?
Exactly. Whether justified or not, there's a real fear for some people about job security, safety, even cultural change.
Mm-hmm.
And he's painting this picture of America under threat with himself as the only one strong enough to protect it. It's that whole savior narrative again.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's say you're someone who's buying into all of this. What is it about him specifically that resonates? Because let's be real, this isn't his first rodeo.
Right, and that's what makes it so interesting, because even though he was in the White House, he's somehow still able to position himself as the outsider. The guy battling against the deep state, the swamp, whatever you want to call it.
It's wild, right? Like he's running against the very system he was a part of.
Exactly. But that's the key. His supporters, a lot of them anyway, distrust traditional politicians. They distrust institutions. They see him as someone who speaks their language, who gets their frustrations. He's still their disruptor, even if he's the one trying to disrupt the very thing he helped create.
So it's not just about the policies themselves. It's about sending a message. It's about belonging to a movement.
Precisely. And that sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger, is incredibly powerful, especially in a time when things feel really uncertain.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's where I get tripped up. What about the controversies? And I'm not just talking about the tweets. I mean, his response to the pandemic was a lot.
Absolutely. And objectively speaking, there were major, major flaws in how things were handled. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, think about it from the perspective of someone who's already distrustful of authority, of experts.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
His defiance of norms, the masks, the lockdowns, even if they weren't the right calls, they might have actually made him more appealing to some people.
Well, hold on. Are you saying his response to the pandemic might have actually helped him with some people?
For a portion of his base, yes. It reinforced that image of him as a fighter, someone who doesn't back down, even when it might have been in everyone's best interest.
That's kind of terrifying. But I get it. Like, the worse things got, the more some people dug in.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
Because for some of his supporters, any criticism of him is seen as an attack on them, on their values. So the more he's attacked, even if it's justified, the more they rally around him. It's a vicious cycle.
So how do you even begin to untangle that? Because it feels like we're talking about two completely different realities here. It's like we're speaking two completely different languages or something.
It really is. And that's part of what makes this whole thing so challenging, because how do you even have a rational conversation about, policy, about facts, when those things have become so entangled with identity, with belief?
Yeah. And it's not just the pandemic, right? I mean, January 6th was, that was huge. You can't just sweep that under the rug.
Absolutely not. And it's a prime example of how the same event can be viewed through these completely different lenses. Because for some people, it was a horrifying attack on democracy, a day that shook them to their core. But for a portion of his base, it's become something else entirely.
Like what? I mean, they're not condoning violence, are they?
It's more nuanced than that. I
Yeah.
think I've seen comments online, heard people say things like they were just trying to make their voices heard, or the media blew it out of
So
proportion.
they're minimizing it, but why? Why downplay something so serious?
Because it feeds into that same us versus them mentality, right? If you already believe that the system is rigged, that your side has been silenced, then actions that might seem extreme to others become justified, even heroic.
It's like they're living in a completely different world.
In a way they are, because they're consuming information, whether it's news or social media, that reinforces their existing worldview. It's this echo chamber where dissenting voices are drowned out, and any challenge to their beliefs is just proof that they are out to get them, you know?
So you were curious about what makes him tick, why people find him so compelling even now, and honestly, it seems like it all comes down to that deep-seated need to feel heard, to feel like they belong, even if it means clinging to a version of reality that's not entirely accurate. And the scariest part, this isn't just about one guy. It's so much bigger than that.
Exactly. He's a symptom of something much bigger. A deep dissatisfaction and distrust that's been simmering for a long time. And that's why it's so important to understand this, to really grapple with it. Because even if he fades away those underlying issues, that anger, that disillusionment, it's not going to disappear overnight. And if we don't find a way to address those root causes, to bridge the divide, to rebuild trust, well, someone else will come along and exploit those same anxieties, those same fears. That's the real takeaway here, the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
That's a lot to unpack, but you've given us a lot to think about. So to everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you today? What are your thoughts on all of this? Hit us up on our socials because this is a conversation that needs to continue.